Please welcome Gernot Klein.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. We're going to hear a lot of talks today about the great features and the capabilities that Dataiku offers. And we're going to hear from our customers how they today use these capabilities to drive value in their organizations, in their enterprises. So what I would like to do here today is not talk about the now, but offer a brief glimpse into the hopefully near future of how we believe organizations and enterprises will be able to not only drive value from their investments into data and AI, but also be able to differentiate themselves. And by differentiating themselves, being able to drive a competitive advantage in their sector, in their industry. Now, for that, what I would like you to do is imagine the following scenario. What you can see here on this graph, in this very simple, is a situation of an enterprise, it might be your enterprise, that has started out experimenting with AI, with data, and investing into the different capabilities. And as time goes on, they are going to spend more and more into these capabilities because they're going to have different AI models, they will have license fees, they will have to upskill their workforce, they will probably have more cloud costs, more computing costs, and they're probably also going to use a lot of consultants because typically consultants are very good helping organizations to identify the right use cases and then help implement these use cases in an organization. So lots of spend as time goes on. Luckily, if they do that correctly and if they use the right consultants, they will also have lots of new efficiency and lots of value coming out of these investments. They will have efficiencies, as I said, they will have better or new automation in the organization, they might have better insights, and which will hopefully lead to new products that they can offer to the market. So lots of spending, but also lots of value gained. Now, the problem with this picture is, of course, that as you're doing it, most likely your competition, or at least one person or one company in your competitive field, is probably going to do the same, simply because maybe they're just watching you and they say, well, we have to do the same. And as time goes on, this is now the green line, the competition will follow you closely. They spend, they get value out of it. And it's very hard to actually quantify who's getting more value out of it. And what that means is over time that you will probably find yourself in a situation where both your companies are getting a lot of value from your investments, but you do not have any competitive edge against your competition. And so the question is, how do you get from a picture that looks like that to a picture that looks more like this? So a picture where you invest into AI, into data, your competition does, but somehow you manage to get a little bit more value out of your investments, and you drive this gap over time, which is a competitive edge and a competitive advantage against your competition. Now, if you think back in history, that has happened before, right? If you think about the time when companies embraced ERP systems, or when they later embraced customer relationship management tools, at the very beginning, the companies who did it first had an immense value gain, but they also had a real competitive edge against their competition. But as time went on and everyone basically implemented ERP systems or implemented CRM systems, the value was still there, but the actual competitive edge has vanished. So if you think about how could you get this edge within the AI field, in the AI time, there's probably different ways of doing it. Excuse me. The one I want to focus here on today is the concept of AI agents. And specifically, I would like to talk a little bit in detail about AI agents implemented or used in the in the analytics and the insights field. And the reason for that is that for the last 20 or 30 years, since companies have started to invest into data, into their data infrastructure, into their AI ecosystem capabilities, what they still haven't fully managed and what hasn't been implemented is this last mile. And this is the gap which typically occurs when a business user has the need for a specific insight into how their business is doing, and they can't get it from a standard dashboard or from a standard self-serve environment. And what we believe is that in future, the companies that will be able to differentiate themselves most are going to be companies that use AI agents in very different fields to not only automate, but to close this gap in the AI and insights field. Now, let's have a look at it in a little bit more detail. So how does this process look at it today? Typically, what happens today in most organizations that I know, if you're a business person and you have a question or the need for an insight that you cannot get from the standard tools available, you will have to go to an analyst. And that analyst then has to go off, it hopefully is curious enough, it needs the skills, it needs to have access to data, and then it needs to feed the information back to the business person. Now, that process is, of course, full of constraints and limitations. So first of all, the business person needs to be able to get hold of an agent. In most companies that I know, it needs to get hold of an analyst. And the most companies that I know, an analyst is a rare resource because they're pretty expensive and most people somehow need something from an analyst. So there's obviously going to be some time delay until the business person gets to the analyst. Once he has got hold of an analyst, the business person needs to be able to explain his problem in a way so that the analyst really understands it, and vice versa, the analyst needs to be able to understand the business person, which is not an easy task. And then as the analyst goes off, we already said he needs to be curious enough, because you don't want him to come back with the first simple answer. You want him to really dig deep and understand what's going on. But he or they also need to have the right analytical skills. They need to be able to query the data. They might be able to build a data science model. Nothing is guaranteed that they have those. And then they still need to have all the right access to all the data in the company. And if they don't have any of these skills, they probably will have to reach out to a colleague, and the whole cycle starts again, leading to more delays and potentially ambiguity in the process. And once the analyst comes back, he needs to put everything into a nice report, into a report that is succinct enough for the business person to understand it. And that's, again, not an easy task. Once that has happened, most likely, the analyst didn't answer exactly what the business person wanted, so that whole cycle has to start again. And you can normally spend hours, days, sometimes weeks on this process. Now, if you go to an AI agent system for this setup, you obviously have a couple of advantages immediately. The first one, as any one of you know who uses ChatGPT, it is more or less instantaneous. So the business user can pose this question into the agent, and he gets an answer back immediately. The other advantage, of course, is he can do that 24 hours a day if he would like to, because unless the system is done for maintenance, there's no reason that it shouldn't be available all the time for any person in the business. And third, these agents can be built from the beginning with access to all the right data. They have all the right skills because you can maintain and build them like that. So there's no question about having to ask a colleague or a separate agent in order to get back to the question that the business user had. One question here is always what happens to the analyst or the data scientist that's previously been done doing this job. They aren't going to be out of a job. They're going to be in the loop or on the loop, as it's sometimes called, because they need to maintain the systems, they need to monitor the systems, they probably also need to help and build these systems in the first place. So it's not making analysts or data scientists redundant, but it's just shifting their workflow a little bit. So how does it look like for the typical end user? As I said, it's going to look like ChatGPT today, most likely. So the advantage here, you don't need any syntax, you don't need any specific language to query your data or to get to the system or the information that you need. You can just type it in the way you would normally interact with a chatbot, and you get your answer more or less immediately. Now, behind the scenes, obviously, it looks a little bit different. And the reason it's going to look a little bit different is because this is now where we come into this near future aspect of the talk. If we walk through from the left to the right, first of all, you need this model or a model that is capable of understanding what the business user has posed, what question it has asked. But not only does it need to understand it and then feedback from previous training, it needs to be able, and that's when we come to step 2, it needs to be able to break that question that the user has into logical subcomponents that need to be answered in order to answer the overall question. And that could be very different things. It could be that the agent needs to write some SQL code in order to get different data or combine or transform data in a different way that hasn't been done before. Once it has the data, it might need to write some Python or R code in order to build a predictive model or a sentiment model or a segmentation model in order to get information out of that data. It also might realize at that time that there's some additional things that the user hasn't specifically asked about, but they somehow link to that question, and he might feed that back in order to start that cycle again if the user agrees to widen his search or widen his question. Now, once this has happened, you need a model in the back, here, step 3, which is capable of checking whether the different components and the different answers coming back from working on these components are suitable to answer the question. So that's a very important job. It needs to be able to understand the answers and compare to the question, make sure that it aligns and it's the process basically has been run through successfully. And then, of course, you have step 4, which is basically a model, or the same model, being able to put everything together and either create a report, create a dashboard or presentation, and feed that back to the business user for his consumption. Now, the near future aspect here, you might wonder, where is it really? Because if you look at this and you follow the news, a lot of this is already in production today. A lot of that is capable of being done today. You have different models. That are capable of writing SQL code or writing Python code. Absolutely, you have co-pilots that do that already. The near future aspect here is none of these systems really does it reliable enough to fully automate and fully let them run autonomously. And that's a big step, because at the moment you get them as support, and that's very useful, but letting them run autonomously, we are not fully there yet. And the other biggest step for me, which I haven't seen today, is actually the step from 1 to 2, because you need a model that is capable of breaking a question into different subparts, into components that the other models can work on, without having previously been trained on that. So it's not, tell me something about a Shakespeare work. It might be something completely different, something that the model hasn't been trained on, but it still needs to be somehow able to make the right breakdowns and say, well, probably I need some data, more data for that, and I need this kind of data science model and so on. And you could, of course, today build these predefine these pathways for the model to help it. But by doing that, you would automatically limit how flexible that model is, because you will basically tell them you do a SQL, you do a Python, but what if it doesn't need to do that, if it needs to do something else? So the model needs to be able to decide in itself how and what to do as a next step. And that's what I haven't seen so far, and that's where the real near future of these agents still is, in my opinion. Now, as you have seen already, because I skipped ahead, how do you get to these agents? And if you think about it, there's probably on a high level, 3 very simple ways of looking at it. The first one is on the left, you hire software engineers, data scientists, data analysts, everyone you need, and you build everything from scratch. Now, the obvious advantage of that is that you're able of building these agents specifically to the needs that you have in your organization. You can tailor them and you can differentiate yourself to every little detail by doing everything from scratch. The downside is it comes at an immense cost, and we don't believe that that's a realistic scenario for most companies. It might be a scenario for the biggest and most profitable and largest organizations, but not for the most companies out there. Then, of course, there's the option on the right, which is you buy an off-the-shelf agent, like you buy some off-the-shelf software product today, and that might not be a bad way of doing it, because for certain tasks of certain companies, that's going to be enough. It's going to be cheap, it's going to be fast. So that might be one way of doing it, but it probably won't allow you to differentiate yourself enough to build up this gap to your competition, because it's an off-the-shelf product and everyone can buy the off-the-shelf product and just implement it. So what we strongly believe is obviously the middle way. Similar like today, where if you build data science products or have a data science use case, you do not start from scratch, right? You use components that have been pre-built by you, be it a data science model or library, be it a tool that you use. You use pre-built models, pre-built components that you can stick together to build the data science use case that you want. And that's also how we believe agents are going to come into organizations most efficiently, by using a platform and then using pre-built components and stitching these agents together to the needs that you have, and still being able to tailor them to your specific needs. Now, excuse me, just very quickly, obviously I've been talking about an agent, an AI agent, the data analytics and the insights field, getting information from corporate information. I don't think that's the only field. Most likely, pretty much every field in an organization, be it sales and marketing, finance, HR, research, will benefit from having AI agents in their processes. And you could, of course, imagine in the beginning that, well, a company might build an agent that covers all of it. One agent, covers every function, everything in the organization. And while that might be feasible at some point in the future, we don't believe that's feasible right now, because the time and the effort and the cost to build something like that would probably be immense, and it wouldn't really give you that much value, because if you think of it, most business users will have questions specific to their function that they're working in. So most likely, at the beginning and in the near future, rather than having this one all-over-encompassing agent, you will have specific agents for specific tasks in the different fields in your organizations, helping you to automate things, helping you to get a little bit more efficient, and in that respect, more faster getting value to your customers and then driving value to yourself. And just to come to an end, I'm often getting asked sometimes, well, okay, so HR, where do you really see, or finance, sales, where do you really see AI agents coming in first into an organization? And the honest answer is I really don't know, because this is really that area, one of the key areas for organizations to be able to differentiate themselves. Because as an organization looks at it, where will they get the most value out of an agent? That's how they can differentiate themselves. Because even if you're a company in the same sector, like your competition, in your internal processes will be so different that it's not going to be said that every company in a certain sector will have a sales performance agent. For another company, it might be in finance. So this is really where you start. It's going to be the biggest, or one of the big areas for you to be able to differentiate yourself from your competition when you build out these agents. With that, thank you very much. appreciate you listening and enjoy the rest of your day.
Insightful perspectives.